Coach, we heard stories last spring about DeQuan Patton and his talent, of course, and then he redshirted to spend more time becoming acclimated to the defensive system. But how have you seen that redshirt year benefit him, and how would you describe his body of work so far this spring?
Well, he has really come along well this spring. You know, I've been pleased with what he's done. I think, you know, it takes a good deal of time to truly get acclimated to so many things, and being able to, probably the biggest thing for him, and he's a bright young guy, but just being able to process new information, you know, as rapidly as you have to process it. You've heard me, you know, talk about that many, many times, Scott. But you know, he's made progress. He's you know, we've probably this spring has been the first time that we've had the opportunity to really get a under the gun look, you know, at what his capabilities are, and he's done well with it, and probably just, you know, it's a matter of continue to learn to process information rapidly, you know, and the quicker he can do that, I mean, you can just see his athletic ability take off when he learns how to do that.
Yeah, looking at my notes from this week last year, Sean, your son, was sitting in here and said that DeQuan was somewhere between Arthur Brown and Purcell Gaskins in terms of his athleticism. How would you evaluate where he's at athletically?
I would just say that he's, you know, that he's an athletic young guy. You know, I couldn't make comparisons, you know, with anybody. You know, the best comparisons I can make are the ones with, you know, people he's competing against right now. But you know, he runs well. He has quickness to him. But you know, that quickness, once again, it just goes back. The quickness is also a mental thing, and it's so easy sometimes to, if you don't process rapidly enough, it evades your quickness, you know, and tempers your ability to react as quickly as you'd like to. But he has the capacity to do so, and he's, you know, going through the mental processes right now to be able to activate that athletic ability.
Coach, you shared some names last week with us that had impressed you at the start of spring practice. Over the last week, what names come to mind first when I ask you who stood out this last week?
You know, from the past week, you know, in this, I think Walter Neal, probably as a defensive secondary player, comes to mind. You know, plays with, again, a good deal of athletic ability. And it's I could just replicate what I said, you know, earlier about DeQuan. You know, he's just in the process of he's midterm and learning how to process the information. But once again, he's a bright young guy, and he's making headway in that degree, and you can see him, because of that, he tends to get himself, you know, a little better every day, is able to respond to things a little bit quicker, doesn't put him a step behind. So, I think I don't know if anybody else really, you know, just nobody jumps off the chart right now, other than the ones I'd mentioned previously.
Coach, one thing some of the offensive players mentioned last week to us is they feel like they've been practicing at a faster pace. Has that been a point of emphasis?
Well, it's always a point of emphasis, and I think our coaches have done a nice job of being able to implement that. You know, it's with the time element, it is important for us, as it would be for any program, to really, you know, get in as much repetition as you possibly can in the time allotted to you, you know, for a practice environment. So that means going, you know, extremely rapidly. And normally that's something that is dictated by your offense in most of the things that you do, because the defense can't move fast if the offense isn't. You know, they've got to get in and out of huddles, get the line of scrimmage, snap the ball, and repeat it over and over and over again. So it's been nothing more than just a matter of emphasis, and our players, thankfully, have responded accordingly, and you know, our coaches have been enthusiastic about trying to push the envelope in that respect, and consequently, we do get in more repetition than we might normally have. And that isn't, it's not 100% consistent. I mean, there are days when the tempo tends to slow, but, we've got to get, we've just got to make that a habit, not only with our coaches, but with our players as well.
And within the last week, saw the NCAA approve the new rule on kickoffs that if you fair catch inside the 25, it's a touchback. Just what is your reaction to that rule? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if indeed, there is a belief, I'll trust, what they say. If there's a belief that it will prevent some injuries, then I'm in favor of it. And it's not so much that as much as it is, how are we going to respond to it, in that regard. How's it going to impact our return teams? How is it going to impact our kickoff team? How are we going to strategically try to, enhance our special teams units? With that, Sean and I are in dialogue with that, in conversation with that, and have been for the last several days.
How much more difficult do you envision it being, given that new rule, to pin a returning team deep on a kickoff? I know that's something you guys have tried to do with a high kick, get them in the 10. Does that become just much less of a possibility with this new rule?
Well, it would seem to be the case, but again, we're in dialogue about exactly those things, because you're accurate. We have been pretty good at being able to, prevent people. Offenses start point against us is far less than the 25-yard line. So there's been some advantages in the way we have covered kickoffs. Now, that obviously is probably, it's under scrutiny in regards to how we change that up. And again, it remains to be seen. We haven't made any clean decisions yet in regards to, we've got a lot of things on the board that we might do this, might do that, et cetera. We're going to have to think them through more thoroughly and decide which way we want to go.
And for Saturday spring game, are you anticipating any format changes, or will it be pretty much the same as what we've seen the last few years?
We'll just go out and play the game. It'll be a regular game. For the most part, I mean, there's a few in-house things that get altered from year to year, but by and large, if you're sitting in the stands watching it, you don't recognize anything any differently than what we might do. We were probably, I think we went ones against twos last year, I believe. The last few years, we'll probably go, and it remains to be seen. We'll probably go ones against ones this spring, but again, we'll make that decision a little later in the week.
With the new rules with recruiting, some schools are definitely been using the spring game for a big recruiting weekend, official visits. I know you can't really talk specifics, but do you envision or plan on using it similarly?
Well, in terms of official visits, we do not have official visits coming in for the weekend. We've got a lot of unofficial visits, a number of youngsters that will be here. You have to move along with the rules. I've never been a big fan of even in-season visitations. Now we do it, but I haven't been a big fan of it because I hate to see your coaches, all of us, myself included, get divided in two different directions. One is preparation for a ball game, and the other one is being detailed with a young person or people that might be here from a recruiting standpoint. And it probably tempers your capabilities in both areas. So I have not been a major fan of that.
Coach, Dalton Schoen's scheduled to be in here to speak with us today, and I was curious if you could first put into words what his playmaking ability meant to your team last season, and then maybe the strides that you've seen so far in spring that allow you to know that he's in the process of maybe taking a next step.
Well, I mean, he obviously made some substantial plays for us last year, but, you know, the thing that stands out in my mind about Dalton is, you know, he's arrived where he is and, you know, affords you the opportunity to ask questions about him because he is such a, you know, he's a program guy, so to speak. I mean, he's a great individual, you know, super youngster. Does everything that you ask of him, does it exactly the way you would like for it to be. He tries to promote the right things within his teammates. That's why he's a player representative. He's just, you know, he's a guy that coaches love to coach. And you know that you're going to, you know, whatever it is you ask him to do, you know he's going to do it. You know he's going to do it the right way. And you know it's meaningful to him. And you know that you're going to get his best effort, you know, snap after snap, day after day, whether it's on the football field or someplace else. So, good kiddo.
Coach, you mentioned special teams earlier, not knowing exactly the direction yet with the new rules, and it's just been a week since we last talked. But kickers and punters, has anybody separated themselves, or is it all still kind of a mixed bag there?
Well, it's still pretty much a mixed bag. You know, I think maybe we. And I wouldn't identify, you know, which ones right now, but I think, you know, we probably are getting close to maybe an upper echelon, you know, of a couple of guys, you know, at 2 or 3 of those positions, I think, as much as anything.
Coach, has Eric Gallen's familiarity with the program, has that kind of helped him at all, maybe adjust, kind of get the hang of things around here so far? Have you seen that in him?
Well, you know, I'm sure that his father helps him in that respect, you know, just gaining an understanding. And I have seen, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about it in that vein. But, you know, I see him doing some things that probably are not, you know, not necessarily extremely familiar to him. But, you know, he does them because he knows that they are things that are expected out of our program, which I'm quite certain that he's learned from his father. And so he's, you know, conforming is not the right word, but he's, you know, he's picking up the process. You know, the system is one thing, but, you know, the process is another, and he's picking that up quite well, and I think his father's had a big impact on him in that respect. But I like the direction he's moving right now.
Also, this is the last week that we really have, you know, access to the players and to ask you questions, things like that, until August. How, over the years since you've had that rule in place, have you kind of seen that? I mean, I know it's tough to gauge, but have you maybe seen that as a benefit to your team to not kind of have those, you know, open practices in the summer or things like that, where we really get a chance to kind of come in and maybe evaluate stuff? Have you seen a benefit to closing off your program a little bit?
I don't know. I haven't looked for what the benefits are. I mean, one way or the other. So I don't know. I don't remember anybody ever asking from the media wanting to come in and watch an out-of-season program. I mean, that's like watching paint dry, probably.
I know last week, Coach, you talked about the quarterbacks and the quarterback battle. Is it something that you would like to, by the end of it, just have one guy and go with one guy when the fall comes around? Or are you open to?
By the end of the week, you say?
By the end of the fall, when you get to September, are you looking for just one guy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, that is truly the case. You know, we'd like to have an established number one and move on. We've got 2 guys that are going to play. I mean, there's no doubt about it in my mind, you know, being healthy, that'll play. But, you know, to have a number one is significant, I think. You know, we'd move in that direction. Doesn't mean it always happens, but that's, you know, truly what we're striving for. You know, I wouldn't, and you know, in all reality, that's true at every position for a lot of different reasons. Maybe the quarterback, you know, a different position than anything else. But, you know, if you've got, you know, I've seen this happen. I've seen teams, and we've done this. You know, I've seen, you know, maybe 2 defensive linemen. You know how people like to rotate defensive linemen, right? Because they think they're all big fat guys that are out of shape, and so they think they have to get rest, you know, and I'm adamantly opposed to that. You know, get conditioned. You want to play the game, then go get yourself in shape so you can play more than 4 or 5 snaps. But you see, and like I said, it's happened to us. Where we've taken 2 guys and we rotate. This guy's going to play, the first series. This guy's going to play second series. This guy the third series, so on. Not going to play any more than 6 snaps at a time, and all of that. Now you got 2 guys that stop competing for a spot because it's automatic for them. They're automatically going to get on the field for their half of the reps, and I like for it to stay competitive. And for a young guy to know that, to become the number 1, he's got to continue to improve, and he's got to do better than the young guy, because, you take I say young guy, the other individual or individuals, if you happen to be a number 2, and you want to know, or a number 3 or a number 4, you want to know that your coaches are paying attention to you. I mean, and we owe them every bit of that, and they want to know that they've got a chance, And if you just leave guys, that's going in a little different direction. But if you just put guys on the depth chart and you leave them down there, then they never have a chance to move up, and then they get disheartened, and rightfully so, because they know that you're not going to give them a chance. Now, the reason I go to that is because we want to keep it competitive all the time. And so if we're playing 2 guys, just rotating them back and forth and giving them equal reps, and they're both considered to be number 1, we are probably negating some of the competitive spirit that you'd like to have. Long answer, short question, but.
Then at this point, how many players are you expecting to be out on Saturday with injury?
I don't know yet. We'll wait and go through that when we get later in the week.
On the quarterbacks, the general kind of lazy comparison is to say one's a runner, one's a thrower, when they both look like they've crossed over a lot more. Are they more similar than people think sometimes?
I think so, and I think our players think so, and I think our coaches believe so. If you watch them, you see, virtually the same. Both of them can run, both of them can throw it. And so, those things being equal, then it boils down to be able to manage the ball game and how we make decisions and process information and so on. So that becomes a big element. All those are key elements, but obviously, and that's true of any quarterback, whether you hit 2 good ones or not. You still have to be able to process information and manage the game well.
Coach, with Kendall Adams and Denzel being out, who are getting the most looks at safety right now?
There's tons of guys back there. McPherson, is a new young guy in our program, and he's getting some repetition back there. I think we've gotten. We've used Neal some. He's a cornerback by trade, but we've used him some in some of those inside positions as well. McGee has taken some reps back there as well. It's kind of a mixed bag right now without guys that we would hope that would be back to.
You have a couple guys that had experience at Nickelback last season. Who's impressed you so far at Nickelback?
Well, Jonathan has is a returner, and he's managed to kind of pick up where he left off. Again, we've utilized, because we're trying to find a spot for him, we've used Neal in there. We've used A.J. Parker in there. He played there a little bit last year. So it's still, we're still trying to pick our way around.
Bill, last week I think you said Wyatt Hubert was doing well, but I think the word you used was things were still a little bit mind-boggling for him. Has he made any headway in that regard?
Wyatt makes headway, constantly. I mean, he truly does. He's one of those young guys, again, that he's really into it. He really cares about it. It makes a difference to him. He tries to do what, his coaches ask of him, and he's a guy that, gives it his very best effort every snap. And guys like that are always going to make some headway, and he certainly continues to do so. Good young guy.
Coach, taking everything else out of the equation and focusing solely on your players, how does the spring game benefit your program?
Well, we treat it a little differently. I mean, we play it like a game. We treat it like practice. You only get 15 opportunities during the course of the spring, and in my way of thinking, that's not an awful lot of preparation time to find out about new players in your program, to implement your offense, your defense, your special teams, to look at things that maybe you didn't do the previous year or years that you think might fit the personnel, and try to experience that. I mean, there's so much to get done in that short period of time. So, that becomes just becomes another practice for us. And yet at the same time, I know that, fans, want to see, what their team, get an idea of what their team's going to look like. And I would project, contrary to popular belief, but I would project that they like to see a game environment and make it look like a game and feel like a game, etc. So, and there's some experience gained in being able to, just pregame warm-up. I mean, that's now, with the silly clock that we have, that counts on, all that junk counts on, on the time. So, we end up having to perhaps having to shorten the ball game. Kind of depends on how many minutes we have left in the week. So, if the ball game gets called off in the third quarter, you understand, call the NC2A, don't call me. Yeah, we just try to make it look like a game, and I think fans, appreciate seeing a ball game, so to speak. Hopefully when it's competitive, when it loses its competitive spirit, then maybe not. And that's why, we have, one of the things we've always done is if one team gets substantially ahead, of the other in a spring game, we'll just flop the scores at halftime, and so the team that's kind of scoring at will, has to come back, and that's led to some close ball games. But I think this year the format might change in regards to, right now I'm contemplating going, ones against ones as opposed to ones against twos. So we'll see.
I know you haven't settled on one quarterback just yet, but are they as far along as you wanted them or needed them to be?
You're new. No, none of us are as far along as I would like for us to be, quarterbacks included. But they're making progress. They truly are. But they're not there yet.
Coach, getting back to what you just mentioned, with you only get 15 of these in the spring, and the value of each one and making the most of each minute. The weather for Saturday has been kind of hit and miss as all spring. It's been, some programs have been forced to cancel their public game. Would there be a scenario where you might have to, say we need to make the most of this 15th practice, and doing it in a pouring cold rain isn't exactly what we need to be doing with this, and call it off?
Well, there's pros and cons for that as well. We don't want to do anything that jeopardizes players or our fan base, as well, people that would come to the spring game. But that's why they have rules about lightning strikes, et cetera, and 8 miles away and all that goes along with it. And we'll abide by that, but in all likelihood, we would play the game. And part of it is the experience gained from being able to do that. On similar Saturdays in the fall, nobody's gonna come out and say, well, let's not do this, let's wait till tomorrow. They're going to play those games unless the lightning and the weather takes it away. But I don't know if we'll have those conditions or not. That part's doubtful. So.
Anybody else? All right, Coach. With Dalton being out, I was going to have you maybe comment a little bit about Nick Kaltmeyer and the job that he did in the bowl game, and maybe the efforts of his spring. And then I'm curious as to those redshirt offensive linemen from a year ago, if you have one or two of those guys that you feel like are going to be in a position to maybe help you this fall?
Well, I think, right now, Josh Rivas, is one of those youngsters, and Josh has come a long ways here this out of season and this spring, and so I think he's going to be put himself in a position to be somewhat of a factor. I think maybe Aiden Mills, perhaps the same way, still remains to be seen. Jury's out, but he's made some progress and I'm pleased with that. The other question was Nick. It's kind of interesting because in back-to-back bowls, the previous year, Scott Franz, who came out of nowhere and really played extremely well and was probably the outstanding, really the outstanding player of the game for us. And then you turn around, the same thing happens this past year with Nick and Dalton, being out, and he stepped in and really played, extremely well. Now we're trying to get him back to where he was in the bowl game. That's sometimes that's kind of the kiss of death, and then you kind of feel like you've arrived and maybe take some things for granted. He's a good youngster, and I don't think he'd intentionally do that. But nevertheless, he's we want him to be back where he was and then some. So.
Coach, I know he's not eligible to play this year, but I was wondering, what have you seen from Hunter Rison since he joined the program?
He's learning. He's learning. I mean, he's we see some athletic ability in him, but he's all that athletic ability gets tempered a great deal for anyone when you're not certain about what it is you're doing. So your mind's working overtime, trying to figure out if I'm doing the right thing or not. And consequently, the God-given gifts don't always show up, as they could. And he's in that process right now. So we really, I've reserved judgment. I'm not going to make any decisions on him whatsoever, any thoughts about his capabilities, until I know that he's got the system in mind and can handle the system and is knowledgeable about it and can process the information well. Then we get a chance to see his true athletic capabilities.
Coach, looking ahead to the NFL draft, which is coming up, it seems like former players DJ Reed and Byron Pringle will both have a shot at being selected. What in your mind makes them capable of playing at the next level and succeeding?
Well, it kind of remains to be seen. I think probably athletic ability is as much as anything. Both of them, have some staying power because of their capacity to be well invested in the special teams kicking game. That helps anybody that's in the league. But I think, athletic ability, I think DJ is, in particular is, a guy that really, is truly focused on his craft, and how to do things and to be, fundamentally, as good as he possibly can. Doesn't mean that Byron is not, but, it really stands out with DJ. And I think, again, their time here was brief, but I think they have a pretty good understanding about, what it takes to have the staying power over time in the league, which, we've talked about so many times with young players that we have that have been able to maintain their time in the NFL because of some intrinsic values, beyond, athletic skills. So hopefully that has an impact as well.
The other cornerback opposite Shelley, would that be Neal right now?
The other
the cornerback. opposite Duke Shelley?
Right. When we go to practice tomorrow afternoon, they'll probably line up that way. Yes.
Okay.
Now, does that mean that's exactly the way it'll be? There's no guarantee, with that at all. But right now, I would say, if we played a ball game tomorrow, that would, in all likelihood, be the case. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.